Hello, my friends. Welcome back to Slow English Stories. It is a symbol of unparalleled power and majesty. But nestled at its very center lies a stone with a history soaked in blood and betrayal. The Koh-i-Noor. For centuries, legends have whispered of a curse that clings to this mountain of light. They say that any man who possesses it will rule the world, but he will also lose everything. It is a heavy price to pay for a diamond. But why is it that for generations, the kings of Britain have refused to wear it? And why does this cursed gem remain so firmly fixed to the crowns of queens? Long before the Koh-i-Noor was ever set in a crown, its journey began in the damp, dark earth of India. We are going back to a place that modern history has almost forgotten, the kingdom of Golconda. For centuries, Golconda was not just a city, it was the global epicenter of wealth. It was the only place on earth where diamonds were known to exist. Imagine a world where the brilliance of a diamond was synonymous with the very name Golconda. Merchants from across the globe, from the Silk Road to the distant Mediterranean, traveled months, sometimes years, just for a chance to stand in the bazaars of this fortress city. The diamonds of Golconda were fundamentally different from what we see today. They were not just carbon crystals, they were revered as symbols of divine purity. The earth of the Koh-i-Noor River basin was treated with a sanctity that is hard to grasp in our modern, industrialized era. The local miners believed that the diamonds were alive, that they grew like plants in the earth, maturing over time to reach their peak brilliance. The sheer scale of the operation was staggering. Thousands of miners lived and worked in the riverbeds, painstakingly sifting through the silt. It was a process of infinite patience, where a fortune could be found in a single handful of sand, or missed by a fraction of an inch. Kings built fortresses specifically to protect these riverbeds, creating a state that operated on a foundation of geological rarity. It was here, amidst the humid heat and the rushing waters of the Koh-i-Noor, that a stone of unimaginable size and fire was pulled from the clay. It was a stone that would shatter the known limitations of gemology. This was the beginning of the Koh-i-Noor. It was not birthed in a royal court, nor was it forged by an emperor. It was birthed by the river, polished by the forces of nature, and eventually discovered by human hands that had no idea they were holding the future of empires. They were holding the mountain of light. The Koh-i-Noor was never just a gemstone. It was a high-stakes entry ticket into the annals of history for conquerors. Its journey wasn't recorded in ink, but etched in blood and the collapse of Asia's most formidable empires. Let's look at the Mughal emperors, the men who elevated the Koh-i-Noor to the ultimate symbol of absolute power in India. To rulers like Shah Jahan, this diamond wasn't just tucked away in a dark vault. It was the crown jewel of the legendary peacock throne. In that era, the stone was the soul of the dynasty, witnessing the height of Mughal architecture and artistry. But that pristine beauty was its own undoing. It made the Koh-i-Noor the most hunted object on the planet. The year 1739 marked the darkest chapter. Nadir Shah, the Persian monarch, launched a brutal invasion of Delhi. History still bears the scars of that day, as the Persian army sacked the capital and slaughtered tens of thousands within hours. Nadir Shah, a conqueror defined by his ruthlessness, knew exactly what he was looking for. Yet when he seized Delhi, the diamond was nowhere to be found in the royal treasury. It was only when a member of the harem leaked the truth that the Mughal emperor had concealed the diamond inside his own turban that Nadir Shah finally laid hands on his prize. The moment Nadir Shah unwound the Mughal emperor's turban and saw the diamond spill out, he reportedly exclaimed, "Koh-i-Noor," meaning mountain of light. The name itself was born from an act of violent seizure. From India, the stone was carried off to Persia. But the history of the Koh-i-Noor is a relentless cycle of instability. Shortly after Nadir Shah was assassinated, The diamond plummeted into the hands of successive dynasties through a series of grotesque conspiracies. Eye gougings, torture, and blood-soaked coups became the norm for anyone who dared to hold it. Not a single owner of the Koh-i-Noor ever found peace. It became the cursed stone. One Persian ruler had to surrender the gem just to save his life. Another was deposed by his own kin. By the time it returned to the Punjab region of India in the early 19th century, it belonged to Maharaja Ranjit Singh. Under his reign, the Koh-i-Noor found a brief moment of stability, a quiet before the inevitable colonial storm. Reflecting on this journey, there is a bitter irony. The most powerful empires in history, backed by tens of thousands of soldiers and impenetrable fortresses, all collapsed the moment they claimed this stone. Was it merely the randomness of history, or was human arrogance being punished by the very desire to possess such absolute beauty? The diamond watched power shift from the Mughals to the Persians, from the Persians to the Afghan and Sikh dynasties, all before it began its final, long trek to the west. There is a dark, whispering legend that clings to the Koh-i-Noor, a shadow that has followed the diamond for centuries. The prophecy is as simple as it is terrifying. He who owns this diamond will own the world, but he will also know all its misfortunes. The diamond became a harbinger of doom. It was as if the stone demanded a sacrifice for the immense power it promised. Yet, look closely at the history of the Koh-i-Noor in Britain. The curse seems to lose its bite when the stone is held by a woman. When Nuhlong Victoria received the diamond, she was not struck by the tragedies that plagued her predecessors. Throughout the reign of the British queens, the diamond has remained a centerpiece of the royal regalia, safely tucked into the crowns of female monarchs. Is it mere coincidence, or is there a strange, ancient logic at play? Some believe the diamond is inherently feminine in its energy, or perhaps the curse only recognizes the masculine pursuit of power and conquest. Whether you believe in the supernatural or dismiss it as historical tragedy, one thing is certain: the Koh-i-Noor remains the only royal jewel that requires a gendered caution, a silent witness to a history that few others would dare to wear. The British East India Company, watching from the borders, saw their moment. Through the Anglo-Sikh Wars, they methodically dismantled the defenses, turning the glory of the Punjab into a crumbling memory. The end came in 1849. With the Sikh forces defeated and the empire annexed, the British demanded the Koh-i-Noor as part of the terms. The final sovereign was a young boy, Maharaja Dalip Singh. He was coerced into signing the Treaty of Lahore, a document that effectively stripped him of his throne and his birthright. Some argue it was a diplomatic gift. History tells a darker story. It was a forced surrender under the shadow of colonial bayonets. When the ink dried, the Koh-i-Noor was stripped from the Punjab. It was no longer a jewel of an Indian court. It had become an asset of the British Empire. As the stone was taken away, the Sikh kingdom ceased to exist, and with it, the last true Indian owner of the legendary gem was silenced. When the Koh-i-Noor arrived in London, it was met with a silence that stung. Expecting a miracle of fire and brilliance, the British public and the royal court were, frankly, unimpressed. In its ancient, irregular Indian cut, the gem looked dull, even lackluster to Victorian eyes, accustomed to precise geometric facets. For Queen Victoria and Prince Albert, the stone was a relic that didn't fit the modern, industrial aesthetic of Britain. It was magnificent in size, yes, but its luster failed to ignite their imaginations. The decision was made to modernize the stone. It was a radical, controversial choice. The Koh-i-Noor would be recut. Traditionalists were outraged, viewing the original shape as the history of the stone itself, but the order stood. In 1852, the diamond was placed on a steam-powered cutting wheel. It was a technological marvel of the 19th century, yet the process was objectively devastating to the stone's physical presence. Day after day, layers of the mountain of light were shaved away. When the work was complete, The transformation was staggering. The stone had been reduced from 186 carats to just 105.6 carats, losing nearly half of its original weight. The result was a brilliant, sparkling gem that caught the light in ways the ancient stone never could. The modern history of the Koh-i-Noor is defined by a single burning question: who truly owns it? This is no longer a battle fought with armies, but a collision of ethics, law, and national identity. To the nations that lay claim to it, India, Pakistan, Iran, and Afghanistan, the diamond is not merely an artifact. It is a piece of a stolen soul, a symbol of a colonial era that systematically stripped them of their heritage. The British government, however, retreats behind a wall of legalism. They point to the 1849 Treaty of Lahore, arguing that the diamond was a formal, diplomatic gift from the young Maharaja Duleep Singh to Queen Victoria. In their eyes, the transfer was legitimate, documented, and beyond reproach. But this defense ignores the context of the document itself, a treaty signed by a child monarch under the coercive shadow of the British East India Company. This creates an uncomfortable precedent for the world's great museums. If the Koh-i-Noor is returned, does it trigger a global collapse of colonial-era collections? Critics argue that repatriation opens a Pandora's box of ownership claims. Yet proponents of its return argue that the diamond's true value isn't its price, but its dignity. Is a signature obtained under duress a contract, or is it the final act of a conquest? The debate remains a stalemate, proving that while empires may fall, the objects they take with them continue to haunt the halls of power long after the colonial sun has set. Perhaps the true curse of the Koh-i-Noor was never about bad luck or misfortune. Perhaps its curse was the insatiable human desire to possess beauty. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the light and shadow of the Koh-i-Noor. History is rarely just about facts. It's about the stories that shaped the world we live in today. If you enjoyed uncovering the hidden history behind this legendary gem, please hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications. By joining our community, you help us keep these stories alive and bring more fascinating history to your feed every week. And I want to hear from you. Do you believe the Koh-i-Noor should be returned to India, or does it belong in the Tower of London? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you in the next story.